I just wanted to express how excited I am to continue the drawing. Like, I'm really liking the way it's turning out so far. And at first, I was kind of like a little bit worried that it wasn't turning out the way I wanted it to. Because when I was going along with the forms and the shapes of the overall structures, I didn't know exactly how it was going to turn out. But what I did know was the style that I wanted to do, more or less. And the style that I wanted to do was like a traditional style that kind of matches the current architecture of the neighborhood. Because sometimes what happens is, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but sometimes you see like new developments happening in like neighborhoods, and usually what the case is that the new developments might be like a striking modern building in a midst of traditional buildings, right? So almost in a sense, it kind of feels like out of place to a certain extent, depending on the building itself, because every building is different. But especially when it comes to like a neighborhood that is very well known for like historic buildings and historic traditional styles, sometimes when you introduce a modern building in the midst of all these traditional buildings, it could feel out of place, and it could perhaps make people who live in those neighborhoods feel like it doesn't belong, or feel like their neighborhood is now changing. And change is good. There's nothing entirely wrong with change. But in my opinion, when we're making these new developments in neighborhoods that are known for their historic architectural styles, I feel like it's important to preserve the architectural integrity of the neighborhood, right? So let's say, for example, Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, right? Bed-Stuy, you know Bed-Stuy for like their brownstones, right? There's more than Brooklyn in general, but Bed-Stuy has a lot of like brownstones, right? These historic buildings, right? You find a lot of like Romanesque revival style buildings, maybe Italianate style row houses and things like that, among others, right? There's lots of different architectural styles in there, but for the most part, to kind of generalize it, it's known for like their brownstones, right? Their buildings that are like dating to the early 20th century, sometimes late 19th century buildings. And when you see like these new modern developments being made like directly next to these historic buildings, it's a bit of contrast. And sometimes people feel like, or people may feel like, because I'm making an assumption right now, but based on what I've heard, people feel like it's not only like signifying a kind of like a gentrification in their neighborhood because of like the different people that it's attracting, but in terms of the style of the building, it doesn't really fit in, and it feels like the neighborhood doesn't feel like coherent in terms of the style of the building. So in my opinion, when I'm making like a new development in a neighborhood that is known for their historic styles, I would want that new development to incorporate some of those old styles, those kind of like those details that really represent the historic styles that are present in the neighborhood. So for example, in this building that I'm drawing, it's kind of giving to that like Italianate kind of style architecture, with the tower element and the exaggerated cornice on the top with a low pitched roof and arches. So that is really paying homage to a lot of the Italianate style architecture that I've been noticing around this neighborhood in Hartford. Because when I walk down the street and I'm observing a lot of the historic buildings around here, I'm noticing the use of, or the presence of, these styles of like Italianate, Romanesque revival, just really like those historic styles. And it would be a shame to not take those styles and feelings into consideration, right? So while yes, it's like a new building that's kind of mimicking the old style, it's kind of like also bringing the contemporary amenities that we would expect in a new development. Like, right, like for example, a lot of old buildings, like back in the day, before cars were even invented, you know, they didn't really take cars into consideration because it didn't exist at that time. So when you look at a lot of old buildings, they don't have parking garages, they don't have parking spaces, right? Those were things that had to be added on in the future, in an improvised way. So, and that's why a lot of times that kind of clashes. Like people who own cars in cities usually don't have spaces to park their cars. They have to park on the street because the older buildings didn't take those into consideration because it didn't exist at the time that they were built. So that's why you don't see those kind of amenities in older buildings, obviously, right? But another thing was also like the presence of like washing machines, right? Washing machines didn't exist when, you know, in the early 20th century, late 19th century or before that, you know? So you don't see the laundry as like a basic amenity in older buildings. That's why laundromats were invented, because back then, before laundromats were even a thing, before washing machines were even a thing, people just washed their clothes in their house, right? They probably had like a little sink. You know, I know my abuelita in her house, she has like a little sink, and it has like an area where kind of like the sink has like little bumps on it. So you would take the clothes there with like some soap, and then you would just like wash it there like by hand, you know what I'm saying? And then you would just hang it up on the clothing line outside. That's what people used to do back then. You look at old pictures of like New York, like back then, you see like in a lot of those houses, in a lot of those buildings, you would always see like the clothing lines with a bunch of clothes just hanging, because that's how people used to wash their clothes and dry them, like just like that. So yeah, but nowadays we have washing machines and stuff, so that's why laundromats exist, because it provides that service for people who don't have the laundry in their building. But now newer buildings typically have laundry as an amenity, which is part of their building, right? Which is part of the amenities of the building, whether that be in the basement of the building or whether that be like an in-unit laundry. I know a lot of people would prefer to have in-unit laundry. That way they can be able to wash their clothes in the comfort of their own home without having to go downstairs or something like that, or to an outside source. So that's something that I would provide in this new development, right? Is either having an in-unit laundry for all the units, or at least having like some kind of laundry room space in a convenient area within the building, right? Aside from that, also taking parking into consideration, because this is a city and this is a state that is mostly car oriented. And given the fact that the current lot of where we're going to be making these buildings is a parking lot, that parking lot still serves a purpose, and it belongs to the insurance company. And to my understanding, that parking lot is for the employees of that insurance company. So if we're going to be taking this lot and we're going to be transforming it into something else, where those people are going to park their cars now, right? We can't just be like, oh, well, you know, it's ours now. Like, no. The whole point of this was to transform this into something that's more usable, but while still serving the original purpose that it was intended for. So what we're doing is we're going to make the parking garage underground. That way it's not like so striking like above ground. We can put it underground, and it's not susceptible to any floods because it's not by any water, right? It's more like on a hill kind of thing. So it's not like it's like right next to a river that might be prone to flooding. You know what I mean? It's not next to that. So in here, we'll be able to make the parking garage underground for the insurance company employees, so that they could still be able to park their car. They could still access a parking garage underground. But now for the new residents that we're going to be introducing into this lot, we're also going to have to be making space for that. So this parking garage is going to be a multi-level parking garage. It's all going to be underground. And it's going to be specific areas for specific purposes, right? So we could say that one level of the parking garage is going to be for the employees of the insurance company. The other, couple levels are going to be for the residents of these new developments. And then we could also have another level that's dedicated for like visitors, right? Because we're going to be adding mixed use, right? So this is a mixed use development. So there's going to be, commercial space. There's going to be people going to those commercial spaces that might need to park their cars somewhere. So it would be ideal if we made space for that as well. So we have a parking garage space dedicated for public parking, right? Where people can go in, they could probably pay like a couple dollars or something, and they could park their car underground in a designated area. And that way, that's all those different purposes are being taken care of, and it's being put underground where it's not so visible above ground, so that we can have more space above ground for those purposes that we are creating in here, which is commercial space and residential space. Most of it being residential, right? It could be most likely affordable housing that is prioritized for people who already live in the area, right? Usually affordable housing would basically, the rent would be based upon like their income, for example, right? That way we're making it accessible to people who already live in the area, and we're not making it this like thing that it's only reserved for people who have all this money and stuff like that, and that's cool, whatever, but it's supposed to serve the community, not work against the community. That's the whole point, right? So that's my little rant on what I'm doing. I'm gonna continue to show you guys my process in this journey of this drawing. I appreciate you guys for coming on this journey for me. This is something that's very exciting. This is something that I love to do. I love transforming spaces, and I love making the use out of spaces that are typically not being used to their full potential. If you like what you see in this video, please give this video a like. That really helps my videos out and my channel out a lot. I would greatly appreciate that. Please consider subscribing if you haven't subscribed already, so that you don't miss a future video. And comment what you guys think about this concept. Is this something that you agree with? Do you disagree with it? Why do you disagree with it? Is this something that you would want to see happen in your neighborhood, or is it something that you feel like goes against it? And if it does, what would you rather see around in your neighborhood? Please go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think. I want to know how you feel about these certain things and these topics that I'm talking about, and we can come up with different ideas and probably strike up some kind of conversation about this. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'll see you guys in the next one.